Okay, just going to redo that section where the phone was buzzing. Some key moments in the book of Judges. Let's look now at a few of the key moments in the book of Judges. We've mentioned Deborah, and this happens early on, chapter 4 in Judges. Deborah is a prophetess who God calls to be a judge, someone who's going to both settle disputes for the community, as well as lead the community in terms of military strategy, defending the people of God here from their enemies. She's going to deliver Israel on behalf of God, his faithfulness. We have Gideon, who's another interesting moment in the book of Judges, chapters 6 to 8. Gideon, famous Gideon's fleece, where he isn't quite sure he can really trust the voice of God here. God, are you sure I'm supposed to be a judge? I'm just a simple guy. He puts a fleece out to test God. In fact, he does that twice, asking God, make it wet and the grass dry if you're really calling me. And then I'll tell you what, make the grass wet tomorrow morning and the fleece dry if this is really you calling me. And both times God shows him, yep, I'm calling you to this. He finally steps into the role of judge. And another interesting moment where we learned about how God, at least how the Old Testament presentation of God thinks about military strength. Israel at this point has 32,000. When Gideon is getting his army together to defend Israel, he ends up with 32,000 men, and God says, hey, that's way too many. It's like, what? What military general says you got too many soldiers, right? Well, God does. God doesn't need human strength in order to protect his people. So he says to Gideon, here, I want you to do a test. I want you to say to all your 32,000 soldiers, hey, whoever's afraid, you can go home. No questions asked, no stigma, just go home. Turns out that 22 of the 32,000 guys leave. He's left with his 10,000 men. You might think, well, okay, he's reduced his troops by over 1/3. Maybe that's small enough. And God says, no. We do a second test. I want you to take them down to a river, and I want you to watch how they drink. Any of them that just kind of literally put their face in the creek and start drinking, they're gone. I want you to just notice who are the ones that scoop the water up so that they can stay vigilant while they're drinking. Turns out, of the 10,000 left, only 300 scoop the water and remain vigilant as they're drinking. So Gideon has now reduced his army from 32,000 to 300. The point being, of course, that God does not need military strength. God works through these 300 men to deliver Israel. And there's the power of God. We run into Samson soon after this, chapters 14, 15, and 16. And here's an interesting guy, right? He's a Nazirite. Now, Nazirite means that he's made a special vow to God to be set apart. A Nazirite is someone who's pledged a special life to God, pledged never to drink alcohol, pledged never to cut his hair, and is to be a set-apart person. Well, Samson doesn't quite live the set-apart life. So much of his life is spent mixing with his culture, not being set apart, distinct, and unique. He's not supposed to, as a Nazirite, you're not supposed to have contact with corpses, with dead bodies. But Samson spends half his life killing people, so he's always around corpses. He's not supposed to cut his hair, but there's that moment when he finally is betrayed by Delilah and tells her the secret to his strength is his hair, and she ends up cutting it. Almost at every turn, Samson seems to be making the wrong choices. Often it involves his rather unhealthy relationship with women. He decides to marry a non-Israelite woman against his parents' objections. And in trying to do so, he heads towards the marriage and he loses her to his best man. That didn't go so well. He turns to a prostitute later on and finally gets hooked up with Delilah, who is not an Israelite woman, right? Not following God. And 3 times she lies to him, and he catches her in the lie as she's trying to find out the source of his strength. Yet, on the next time she asks, he tells her the truth. It's like, what? Why are you trusting this woman? It's a fascinating section of the book of Judges. However, as depressing as the book of Judges can be, I think it all culminates in the most depressing episode of all, when the book comes to an end. Chapter 17 and on into 18. Here we have the story of Micah, the tragic story of Micah. Now, lest we read this, hey, here's the thing. If you're ever having a good day, like you think to yourself, I don't have a right to be this happy, read the last 2 chapters of Judges. That will bring you down to earth, trust me. This story is not just about a guy named Micah, although there is a guy named Micah in this story. This story, pretty clearly, is a parable about Israel. As modern readers, we often read through individualistic eyes. We just see the people, forgetting that in the ancient world, often a person represented an entire group of people. In this case, Micah clearly represents Israel. The story starts with this guy named Micah. And the very name Micah is meaningful. It means who is like the Lord. And so Micah's name is supposed to remind him that no one's like the Lord and that one should be devoted to Yahweh God, should live as the faithful people of Yahweh. And that's precisely what Micah gets very confused about. Story starts off with Micah stealing money from his mother. Basically what's going to happen over the next 2 chapters is I think we can count that 9 of the 10 commandments get broken. 9 of the 10. Starts with stealing, right? Micah steals from his mother. His mother's response is that she's nervous because she's just prayed a curse upon the thief. Then she realizes her son is the thief. And if he gets cursed, well, that means she gets cursed too, because sons are supposed to care for their mothers in elderly age. So she prays a blessing on the thief now, Micah. And the whole thing is just infused with selfishness, radical self-centeredness to this story, not love-centeredness, not the center of the gospel of Jesus. So this is a story that's really helpful for us today as well. Because although we're post-Messiah, we live in the times of post-Messiah, we live in the times of the kingdom come in Jesus Christ, we too can still live lives of radical self-centeredness. We too can mix ourselves in with the culture and not stay distinct people of God. So it's a very helpful, challenging story for us today. The money gets stolen. She curses the thief. She finally blesses the thief when she finds out it's her son. And she promises God that when she gets the money back, which he gives the money back to his mom when he realizes the curse is out there. All this self-centeredness going on through the whole story. And she promises God, I'll give you all the money back when my son gives it back to me. Well, she doesn't give it all back. She gives a portion of it back. And that portion is used to be melted down. It's silver that he stole. They melt the silver down and create an idol out of it. So now the theft has turned into idol worship, literally. Taking the silver, melting it down, and creating an idol. I won't go into all the details. I'll let you read it when you get a chance. Chapters 17 and 18 of this book of Judges. Suffice to say that over the next several passages, He hires a priest to come and work in a little idol factory in his house. He's got this shrine set up of a bunch of idols. This priest, who should be at the tabernacle serving God, ends up serving Micah and his idols. Long story short, almost everything that can be done to violate the Ten Commandments is done, minus one. I think it's they don't violate the Sabbath day. But other than that, everything gets broken. And here's the scariest part of the story. At the end of the narrative, Micah says, having just done all this stuff, self-centeredly trying to make his world safe, he says, "Now I know that Yahweh God will bless me." Not only has he violated almost every one of the Ten Commandments, he doesn't realize that he's violated any of them. He thinks he's done everything to make his world safe, secure, and protected. And he thinks that he has God on his side to protect and bless him, not realizing the radical broken covenant that's happened here. And you want to ask yourself, how is this possible? How is it possible for an Israelite, a people of God? Remember, this is a parable of the whole nation. How is it possible for the whole nation to be treating God this way? And the sad answer is, they've taken Yahweh worship and they have mixed it in with the pagan Canaanite worship of their surrounding culture. They have not kept the people of God themselves holy, set apart, distinct. They've rather mixed in. Instead of being countercultural, they've just become part of the culture. And once you become part of your culture, it's difficult to see. It's difficult to perceive when the way you're living as the people of God has just become like the surrounding pagan forces of your own culture. For self-centered reasons, he mixed Canaanite pagan religion in with his Yahweh worship, and it has now become a polluted form of Yahweh worship. Yes, he still names Yahweh as God, but he worships the false gods as being Yahweh, just like the golden calf incident we talked about earlier, without realizing any of it. And this is what stands as an important challenge to us today. We too, being the kingdom people of God, if we're not careful, can find ourselves giving lip service to Jesus, but mixing our love and passion and worship of Jesus in with our culture in such a way that it pollutes and distorts everything that was meaningful to the kingdom message of Jesus. That's a challenge that all of us face, to keep the kingdom holy and distinct and set apart. And we can let the story of Micah, and really the whole book of Judges, remind us of that on a regular basis.